All right, I will call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The roll call.
Craig here.
Ari here. Snyder here.
Seth's here.
Cummings here.
The record show, we are 5 board members present. I do have in front of me verification of proper meeting notices. Brings us to the action of the agenda. Just some clarification items on the agenda. We do have a new business under action item A, one additional resignation that's been presented. I believe you have a hard copy in front of you. It's a Maggie Davison, a paraprofessional. Again, a resignation. As we move down the list in action item H, we've got policies listed as an action, and it should really read as a first reading of said policies as they're out of the policy committee. And action items I and J, don't want them to be misleading, but the action presented is, does the board want them placed on the next meeting agenda for August? So we'll address those as we get there. Any other alterations to the agenda, Mr. Henning?
There are none.
So with that said, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Great. Second.
All right, we got a flurry here. We're gonna go with Mr. Crave made the motion and Mr. Fari has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 vote. Brings us to the action of minutes from the regular meeting from June 14th. Any alterations, corrections to the additions to the meeting minutes?
Cummings will make a motion to approve the Wednesday, June 14th regular board meeting minutes.
Is there a second? Okay. I've got a motion by Ms. Cummings to present as presented, seconded by Mr. Fari. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Brings us to the minutes of the regular,
Closed session.
the closed session, I'm sorry, on June 14th. Any alterations, corrections to note there?
Seth will move to approve those meeting minutes.
Do we have a second?
I was absent.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Mr. Sets to approve as presented, seconded by Mr. Fari. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Brings us to the minutes of the policy committee meeting. We've got 2 policy committee meeting members present. Any alterations to note here? Mr. Crave?
I think it's self-explanatory, and I will move for approval.
Okay, got a motion by Mr. Crave. I will second that motion. All those in favor of accepting the minutes from the policy committee meeting?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Brings us to board reports, policy committee meeting. Myself, Charlie, and Susan did meet on the 26th. We met with Scott Brown from Neola, Mr. Henning, and Ms. Karnick. Any commentary you'd like to add, Mr. Crave?
It went more, it was better than I anticipated. So, as you imagine, I am not a big one for thick, lengthy written policies, but he presented things in a very clear, concise manner. His presentation was on, some of it was really simple. What do they call that division? What was that called?
It's like the bylaws and definitions.
There you go. Yeah, bylaws and definitions. We picked out one or two little things that we could add a sentence to, but otherwise, we thought we would bring them here to this board meeting. And that's the idea is that he'll bring these forward. This Neolia is the company which does this type of policy work. He's a former administrator from McFarland, and we'll just keep this moving.
Yeah, and Scott will be here to present to the full board for the August meeting, so you'll all get a chance to meet with them.
Yeah, the only things I would add are, it's very comforting, Mr. Brown gave a great presentation, very comforting to know that the majority of the school districts in Wisconsin are working through Neola. The way their system works, it compiles all of those other districts, so they've run into something, they have a system to incorporate that to other schools to utilize, so it's very efficient. We did note in there, and I would encourage all board members to plan on attending. Board members are always welcome to attend those committee meetings, but as we get into some of the meatier sections of policy, I would say, where there will be some lengthy discussions, I would encourage board members, and we'll try to schedule those so that all board members can attend, so when we can stay true to our committee structure, so when things are brought to the board, we can pass them as they should be passed. So
How many policies are you gonna do for me?
we're trying to do a section, a section or two. When we get to the bigger ones, it'll just be a section. So there'll be multiple meetings, we're probably looking at one a month. But we did talk in the meeting about trying to give board members, a little foresight of what's coming up for discussion, so. Again, this first round, if you look through it, pretty straightforward on definitions and not a lot to debate in there, really. Pretty standard boilerplated items. Any other questions, board members? All right, we'll move right along. We'll get into administrative reports, and we'll start with Mr. Bartelt to talk on the high school handbook. You have the floor, Sean.
Good evening, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So just want to briefly go through the changes to the student parent handbook. For the high school, you should have the changes in front of you. There aren't really many updates or changes that need to be done from a high school standpoint in our handbook. I feel it's in a pretty good spot right now. There were just a lot of small edits that I had to update with, school board roles, our staffing, calendar, and whatnot. So all those little pieces were all updated. We did have COVID information, so that's been removed with social distancing and masking. Something that came out of the curriculum team, our curriculum council committee, was the graduation requirement. We were at 3.5 credits for social studies. So just a reminder that that's now 3 credits this upcoming school year, and that is the state requirement is 3 credits, which means that our elective credit went up to 10, which it used to be 9.5. There's still 26 credits to graduate from Waterloo High School, so nothing changed with that. We just shifted a required 0.5 social studies to an elective. And then the last piece, which there's been a lot of discussion about this, not only within our staff, but also myself with other principals in the area, specifically with academic dishonesty, plagiarism, cheating with artificial intelligence or AI. That's very common, and that's happening not only in schools, but that's happening a lot in colleges, meeting with college representatives. It's very common, students are using that. So we're trying to get ahead of the game and put that in our handbook, that if students are using ChatGTP, which is something that will just basically write a paper for you, that would be considered academic dishonesty. That didn't exist in our handbook in years past. So the consequences are laid out there, and that will be added to our handbook for this upcoming year. We'll review that with students as well. Those are the major updates with our high school handbook.
Any questions for Mr. Bartelt? All
And
right.
with that being said, I don't know if this would be a spot, I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Schneider, but I know, we have the co-curricular, that's an actual action item down below. Would this be a time that Thurston could review that before your action, or do you wanna wait until that action at a later time?
No, we can, I'm fine with adding that discussion in now.
That way he can kind of explain it and everything.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you. Thurston, if you're on, go ahead.
All right, good evening, everybody. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Just one change that we're looking to put into the co-curricular handbook to basically coincide with a change that we put in our handbooks. Just talking about like bullying, harassments to a protected class, which is sex, race, religion, creed, age, national origin, ancestry, pregnancy, marital status. That got put in, I believe, in May or April. But basically, we just wanted to make sure the co-curricular handbook coincided with that. Kind of similar to kind of having some type, or like with our rule, I believe it's 3 with drinking and smoking, having concrete suspensions for people that are acting in this. So basically the violations are listed, I believe, on the sheet that you have. With the first violation, just talking about the suspension for 20% of the season's games. If basically they do it again, they would have a 50% suspension of a season. And then the last one would be being suspended for 1 calendar year. So we made it pretty similar to that rule, but again, we wanted to just make a concrete percentage rather than it just being on the discretion of the athletic director and principal. And it goes to the same thing with activities. Activities would have 3 activity-related field trips, conferences for their first violation, the next 4 for a second violation, and then same thing for their third as a calendar year of being suspended. But that's the only change, is adding that rule into the co-curricular handbook.
Any questions, board members?
I just have one. The violation for activities, you've got, they can continue to practice, but I don't see that in that for athletics. Are they also able to practice?
Yes, they're expected to be in good standing with the team, meaning that they are required to being at practices. Otherwise, it would not be counting towards their suspension. So if somebody got a suspension and then they just don't show up, it would not be counting. I believe there is some type of wording in the co-curricular handbook for that, but I just don't have it right off the top of my head.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Schuster and Mr. Bartelt. Brings us to Ms. Zeman to speak on the intermediate school, middle school handbook and standards-based grading. You have the floor, Christine.
As I looked at our handbook for intermediate and middle school, I wanted to pay close attention to what the high school handbook was stating as well as the elementary handbook. So I did the same as Mr. Bartelt, and I removed COVID information. I updated school calendar, I updated the staff directory, and I aligned the language in our handbook regarding grading systems to the board policy on grading systems. So the actual wording in the board policy is now in our ISMS handbook as well. So I updated our fines and fees, and I also added language regarding the use of AI into our disciplinary offenses. And Mr. Bartelt and Mrs. Beacon and I aligned our arrival and breakfast times so that we are consistent across all buildings.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Zeman?
I don't know if this needs to be updated, but the handbook on the 4th page, the school board members need to be updated. not sure when that gets done. That's the old board members. And then, are we gonna be discussing the grading, system below, or is that something we should be discussing now?
My interpretation there is it's been updated to what's currently the practice,
Okay,
and we'll address a new business,
got it,
new discussion.
okay.
Sarah, can you tell me where the board member, are you talking about in my handbook, they're not
Yeah.
correct?
Yep, in your handbook,
Yep.
second page into your handbook.
Right, it's
So
right under
the
the
fourth-
introduction information.
Okay. I apologize for that, I will get that changed.
Any other questions or commentary for Ms. Zeman? Thank you, Christine. Brings us to Ms. Beacon to speak on the elementary school student handbook. Are you there, Holly?
There, can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right, awesome. So I did exactly kind of the same thing with my handbook as well. We aligned everything so that we were having consistent start times and breakfast times. I don't think I put in the new fines and fees yet. I have it highlighted in my handbook because I was waiting for approval. So that's gonna be done. The same with staff directory. I think I put in the new board members, but I'm not sure. COVID was already out of my handbook, so I didn't find it in there to take out. That must already be done. And I didn't feel like it was necessary to put in any AI language at the elementary level. I don't think that's, I mean, I can align my, offenses and consequences with them. I can put that language in if you feel like it's necessary. But at my level, we're not, that isn't something that I think is necessary.
Board members? Any input?
No.
I would tend to agree with you and not as concerned with AI at that level. I do believe the introduction does need to be updated still.
Oh, okay.
It mimics the 5 through 8 handbook.
All right. Okay, thanks. I'll check it out.
Any other items, board members? All right. Thank you, Ms. Beacon. Brings us to Ms. Armentrout, talking about redefining ready work with Scott Carr.
Good evening, everyone. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to update the board on some of the work that the administrative team has begun this summer. On June 13th and 14th, Scott Carr, who is one of the CISA consultants, he was with CISA 7 and is now moving to CISA 2, came and joined our admin team to start an opening discussion on redefining ready. And so many districts in Wisconsin are looking at what readiness really means for our graduates and what it looks like. So we're talking about the skills and attributes beyond achievement and the way that we would want the skills and attributes we would want every graduate to have to find future success in not only career but community and overall life. So we started that exploratory stage of kind of discussing what that work might look like with a district team. And our next step would be to create a district readiness team to increase our conversations around what a portrait of a graduate might look like for Waterloo. And so more information to come. Like I said, we were just sort of in the beginning stages and hope to grow our collaborative teams around this work.
Okay. Any discussion or questions, board members? Is there a time frame established for creating this team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really the readiness team would be that team, so the district team that would have more stakeholders at the table would kind of create that timeline. So our initial timeline right now is increasing discussion around our leadership admin team and then creating that district level team to kind of create that pathway for the work. So really at the beginning stages yet.
Yeah, I think the idea would be to lay the groundwork so that when staff return, we can engage them in a bigger conversation to kick off the school year.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion?
What are your expectations from the board for this reading readiness?
Yeah, when we look at our portrait of a graduate, really it's a large collaborative team, and the board would definitely be invited to be part of that conversation, as well as community members, business area businesses. So we would invite, or when we get to that start and have more information to share, we would want the board to be part of the stakeholder team there.
I mean, is it something the board will have to approve? Is it, I mean, what is our role, I guess? Are we gonna have to approve something that you bring to us, or is it gonna be I guess I don't quite understand what this is about.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those more bigger conceptual, ideas where we want to hear input from all stakeholders to make sure that we're headed down the right path for how we prepare kids in Waterloo. And so that's, like Michelle said, that's parents, that's board members, that's teachers, that's administrators. And so we would want your voice at the table, making sure that what we're preparing kids for is what you believe, the Waterloo School District, what the function of the school district is. So we don't, there's a lot of different pathways to take, and not necessarily saying that any of those are more right or more wrong than others. It's just which ones do you want to take, and so that input is what we'll be seeking from you.
What's the difference between that then and our supposedly strategic plan that we're supposed to be having?
They very much should align with each other. The strategic plan is more like how you're going to go about getting the work done. This readiness, or the portrait of a graduate, is kind of more of like what we're aiming towards. So they very much should align with each other.
And if I can just jump back in, that's exactly why we wanted to start that discussion now, because, it really does align with that strategic planning work. And our initial discussions with Scott really lent themselves to him presenting the variety of other districts that he's worked with. What have they done? What are our options? And how do we go about gathering input from the variety of stakeholders that we really want to make sure are at the table. So again, very, very beginning exploratory stages, which is why I apologize I don't have anything more concrete, but just wanted to inform the board that we were starting to kind of dip our toe into these discussions. And as Brian said, they really align with strategic planning.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or anyone? Well, we look forward to hearing more as we work through this process. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Brings us to Ms. Gould to speak on the insurance renewals.
Yeah, so in your packet, you guys should have the proposal that I received back in June. This year we switched from Chubb Insurance to Church Mutual. And back in about March, they did an appraisal on our property. So we did have almost a $7.7 million property increase, which caused part of our property insurance expenses to go up. So I'll point out that there weren't any major changes. We did have one change to cyber security. That is still a free insurance currently, but our deductible did go up from $5,000 to $10,000. But I spoke with our rep, and he said that most districts went to a $25,000 deductible, but because of how well our IT department has done, we only have a $10,000 deductible. So I thought that was some pretty good news. Kind of going down on our workers' compensation, our experience modification did increase, which caused us to have about a $2,600 cost increase. Initially, when we got the quote, they were only giving us a 15% dividend, so we had them go out to bid, and they did come back with another 30% flat rate dividend, so that was good. Overall, we're looking at about 11% increase. So 8,500 of that comes from our property. There really was no change in general liability, and then about 2,600 for our workers' compensation. So just a little over $11,000 is where it went up. Do you guys have any questions on that?
So when they look at the renewal, Susie, on the mod factor, is that a, what is that, a 3-year period they look at, or do they do a weighted average or anything?
Let me go back and get that page quick. Yeah, so that goes based on per claims over the last few years. Average is about 0.81, and we should be at less than a 1, so like right now we're at the 1.33. This should trend down a little bit, but right now I did ask for a sheet of where we had been experienced mod over the last, I can't remember how many years. I should have shared that with you guys. I did think about it. And we did fluctuate. We did go up and down. Right now we're just on an upward swing, but we're going to get that down again just because of a couple higher claims that happened a few years ago.
Yeah, but our mod rating is a rolling average. I believe it's a 3-year average.
3-year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then did we take the terrorism coverage, or no? It says it can be added.
We define that.
Okay.
Let me get to that sheet. There are a couple different ones.
Susie, Brian said he declined it, so I don't know.
Okay,
if you heard
I
it.
thought so, but I wanted to double check. Sorry. Thanks, Brian.
No problem. Any other questions in regards to the insurance renewal? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Susie.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move forward here to the approval of bills and vouchers. We have in the packet treasurer's reports, the superintendent listing of disbursements and their district receipts through the month of June. Are there any unanswered questions in regards to any of those documents, board members? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion to approve as presented.
Also move for approval.
That's a second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Setz. And to clarify, you're going to approve all 3 items that are presented?
Yes.
All right, that'll be a roll call vote.
Craig, yes.
Or yes.
Schneider, yes.
That's yes.
Cummins, yes.
All right, motion will carry on a 5-0 vote. Brings us to legislative updates. Any legislative news you'd like to share, Mr. Henning?
Well, we, as everyone's probably aware, we do have a budget bill, shared revenue bill. We haven't necessarily yet seen the language for it, but there's been several publications about what the highlights are, and there was a substantial influx of money to education, much of which will end up going to private education, not public education, but we are expecting about $325 per student in increased revenue, which will be the first time in several years that revenue has been increased. So, we've got some ground to make up, but it's a step in the right direction. Interestingly enough, one of the big debating points was this low revenue ceiling. And so on average, the Waterloo School District spends about $10,300 per student for operating. And they raised the floor on the amount that schools could levy to run their school systems to $11,000. So we were one of the districts that was in a low revenue district, or considered a low revenue district. And so there will be a slight adjustment that the Waterloo School District will receive as part of that. So that's also a step in the right direction. Those are kind of the highlights. If you go on the, there's various different websites covering it, but there's some explanations by Evers and both the Democrats and the Republicans, about why each side did what they did. And, I think it probably was a pretty good example of a bipartisan bill, because it looks like there was give and take there. So that's, we're glad government's working, because now we know what to do and where we're headed for the school year, and we can make decisions accordingly.
Any other board commentary? Thank you, Mr. Henry. Any announcements this evening? You have any?
Just a reminder that we are meeting next Wednesday with Steve Zock for some board professional development, and we're hoping everybody can attend.
That's at 5 p.m.?
5 p.m. in the community room here. Yep.
Okay. 5 p.m. in this room, yep. All right, and that brings us to public input. Does anyone wish to provide public input this evening? All right.
You want to speak, Amanda? Yeah, Amanda.
Okay. So, just a little bit on the grade weighting that might be up for discussion, just to offer a perspective from elective classes and how that could potentially impact electives in the future. Even if it's not right away, it has the potential down the road to overall affect enrollment numbers in those elective classes, agriculture, business, tech ed, those areas. And just kind of in my experience from some of my students as well, I just came from the fair today working with a group of students who are probably some of the hardest workers that we have, and those might not be the students taking the AP classes, just because it doesn't really fit into their career or college plans and goals. And to just keep that in mind when you guys are talking about it and looking at it. We have a lot of our population of students that are those career-focused, trade-focused, tech school-focused kids, and to maybe add some of the grade weighting might negatively impact those students. So just to keep that in mind as those conversations go forward, because I think we have a lot of those students who are very hardworking and do very well, and if I don't want to see those negatively affected by not taking some of those classes just because it might not fit in with them.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other public input? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on.
Is that what you came for, or just to get away from the kids?
So, we will move into new business, right into action item of staff positions. Everything's presented in your informer packet. Again, please remember, we're adding the resignation of Maggie Davison, paraprofessional, to this list. Is there any questions in regards to all of the people that are presented here? I'm assuming all the reassignments were planned reassignments, Brian?
Say that again, they were all what?
Planned
Yes.
reassignments and
Yes.
part of our staffing plan?
Yep.
I'll move to approve the staff positions with resignation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Yep. Got a motion by Mr. Sett, seconded by Mr. Farr to approve as presented. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Brings us to action item B, the co-curricular handbook. We were presented the information by Mr. Schuster. The one change, I believe, is item number 7, which would bring the co-curricular handbook compliant with our student handbook. Any further discussion in regards to that, those changes?
I'll move to approve the co-curricular handbook.
Okay, we have a motion again by Mr. Set, seconded by Mr. Ferry, to approve as presented. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Brings us to the action item of the elementary, intermediate, middle school, and high school student handbooks. We were presented on all three. We have a few noted updates that I'm sure would be incorporated into said handbooks. Any further discussion, questions here?
Well, the only one I have is the middle school with the grading system, which we're gonna talk about later, and I don't think we've made a decision of what that system's gonna be. So can we hold off approving that one until we have a grading system, or do you want to just put that in there and then change it if we?
Yeah, I think
Something different.
it's a very good point, Jim. I think it would be our preference, and and you can tell us we'll make it work however, but we've got registration coming up, and we're going to be asking parents to sign off on handbooks, and the principals are working on getting those out in their buildings and to all parents. So it would be nice if we could have that ready to go, and then if you want to make a change, we would have to communicate that change similar to the change we made last year, in the fall as well. So it would be nice to move forward, but if you think that's going to only create more confusion, then we'll figure it out.
My opinion on the matter is we would just approve to what's currently utilized. Just like anything else, if we change it, it has to be updated. So for clarification purposes, I would think we would move forward, and if we change, we change.
Well, with that being said, now I'll approve those handbooks.
Okay? We've got a motion to approve the handbooks with the changes as presented and the noted few additional changes by Mr. Setz. Seconded by Mr. Ferry. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 vote. Go to action item D, student fees and food service pricing. The pricing is listed here, what's proposed. I don't know if you want to speak on this at all, Mr. Henning, but we have the 2023 cost with the 2023-2024 proposed column right next to it. Looks like we've got some increases across the board. Nothing that I would call substantial.
Yeah, the majority of our fees remain pretty reasonable in this district. I know some districts have really used those as a way to generate revenue for programs and whatnot. We certainly have fees, and those are a necessity, but we've been able to keep those pretty reasonable. Although I have no doubt that they're still difficult for some families to afford. But I think we've done a good job of keeping those low. So I would recommend that most of the things that we're doing for this year are staying the same. There is a modest increase to headphones and the planners. And then, of course, the food service, which is reflective of the cost we're seeing, for food service items. And so 5 cents per meal and per breakfast for all age levels. You can still eat for around $3 in the district. It'd be nice if they would bring back the free program for everyone. That didn't make it in the budget for this year. However, people that are eligible for free and reduced lunch would still be able to apply through that program and receive free lunch. So the paid prices are all going up 5 cents.
Any questions, board members?
I'll move to approve the fees and service pricing.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Seth, seconded by Mr. Ferry to approve as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 vote. Brings us to action item E, insurance renewals. We received the information, or were presented with the information, by Ms. Gould. Same details here. Any discussion, board members, on the insurance renewal?
So is this just, insurance that we hold, not individual insurance for the teachers or staff, right?
Right, this is
Okay.
property and liability and workers'
I
comp.
just wanted to make.
Yeah, this is not health insurance and dental insurance.
Okay.
I would only add, we just went through a insurance review in our company, and there's increases across the board throughout the insurance industry. Safe to assume, so.
I'll second that. I work in insurance and we're raising rates in general.
So I'll blame you, huh?
You certainly can. Actually, you can blame inflation.
There you
That's
go.
that's what's actually driving the price increase.
Yes. Well, and incident rates, right?
Cummings will make a motion to approve the insurance renewals.
I'll second.
Okay. A motion on the floor by Ms. Cummings, seconded by Mr. Setz to approve the insurance renewal as presented. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 vote. Brings us to action item F, the early graduation request. We were contacted here by, if I dare to say that name, Yaziel Campos Charez. Hopefully I said it fast enough. But to an application for early graduation. I believe the administration is on board with this early graduation request. Is there any discussion regarding the request?
Yeah, the administration would be recommending approval tonight. I did send something to you a few weeks ago about this request with a little bit more information, but Isaiah has done the work that he needs to get to this point, and we're very proud of him. And he wants to get going with the next chapter of his life, and I think he's done a professional job asking you and getting to where he needs to get to.
I will
So move for approval.
I'll second.
I'm going to go with Mr. Crave as moved for approval of this early graduation request, seconded by Mr. Setz. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Brings us to action item G, the 2023-2024 Declaration of Educational Standards. It's laid out in the board packet in regards to the Wisconsin statute. Our curriculum coordinator, Ms. Zeman, has recommended that we utilize the following standards, and they are listed out here. She also recommends that this information is posted on the school district website and is in district office for public notification. Any discussion in regards to the items listed here?
I'll move to approve the standards.
Cummings will second.
Okay, got a motion by Mr. Setz, seconded by Ms. Cummings, to approve as presented on the Declaration of Educational Standards. All of those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Brings us to action item H, policies 1 through 175.1. You've been provided copies, hard copies in your informer packet. They were reviewed through the curriculum committee. And,
Policy.
No, policy
I'm
committee.
sorry, policy committee. And thanks for correcting me. You guys are on top. And it carried through our committee with a 3-0 vote. Again, this was relatively light lifting here on some clarifications and pretty standard boilerplate and policies. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, and just for clarification, you can kind of handle this one of two ways. You can either make a motion to bring these for a second reading at the next meeting, or you could make no motion and just, we'll bring them forward at the second meeting. We've done it both ways in the past. So you're not approving the policies, you're just moving them forward to a second reading.
Yeah, our current policy that we follow as a district, we have the first reading and the second reading. And the clarification point, once all of the policies are brought through, they'll all be adopted, but we won't operate under these policies until we project next year, the next operating school year. So, however you guys would like to proceed.
I think if we bring this to a vote, to bring them to a second reading, that it's very clear for the community and members who aren't here tonight. So that's what I do. I will move for approval to move these forward to a second reading.
I'll second that.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Crane, seconded by Mr. Ferry, to bring said policies through to a second reading. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Okay, brings us to action item I, standards-based grading. There's been a fair amount of discussion in regards or surrounding the standards-based grading. The question posed here on the informer packet is, does the board want to consider this item during the August meeting when we have a full board to make a decision? And or do we have any questions in regards to the standard-based grading system that we are currently operating under?
I'm fine with waiting until August, we have everybody here, because I do know that, Chad has young kids as well that it affects, so I would say if we could have the full board, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Are we going to request, or does everyone feel as though they have the information they need to make a decision? Is there any other information we want from the administration to help us make a decision?
I mean, I would say if something could be given, it would be statistics, because it's said in here in the handbook that there's statistics of the other grading. I would like to see the statistics of the 1 through 4, especially when you reach 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and how it is impactful to kids that might want an A instead of a 3 because the teachers are not giving 4s, or it's very hard to get a 4, and you have to go above and beyond to get a 4, which I don't. And then how does that play out to GPA? Because when a kid gets a 4, normally, or 4.0, and then they're getting a 3.3, and they don't understand why, and there's no explanation around it. So we need to better understand if we're truly going to stay with this 1 through 4. Maybe by next meeting, we have to understand that the teachers understand the 1 through 4 grading, and the parents and the kids, because at this point, there's a lot of gray area.
Yeah, I'd like some kind of, hopefully a written explanation of exactly what the existing system is. I don't know that I've ever seen it.
No, we have never seen it.
The board's never seen it ever.
No, when it came, it was told to us that we were going to review it and look at going at it, and then there were meetings held, and then it was done. So maybe I missed that meeting, but I gotta be honest, the communication and the meeting that was held that parents could come to, there was 5 people that showed up. So communication was super lacking there. And so we have a lot of frustrated parents, and me as one of them, because I have a daughter that really likes a 4.0. And so I had to have her email every single teacher this year after this started and say, what can I do to get a 4? What do I need to do? I've proven that I can do it, and I'm showing you with the work, but how can I get to a 4? And some have responded back with, you can't get to a 4, or you have to do extra work. So she spent a lot of nights doing extra work to get that 4. So, like I said, the communication was not properly communicated. So if we're gonna stick with this, then we gotta figure out how to come out. So I guess that's my stance on that. So
Yeah.
like I said, statistics wise, I would love to see what why we would want to go to this, especially, I mean, maybe not 5th, but when you get into 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade, like really 8th grade, 7th grade, you're preparing for high school, which is A, B, C, D, and F, or, A, B, C, D, and F, right? Yeah. So you're preparing for that, and then, to be switched, I don't know if we're really preparing our kids to go to high school, because it's gonna be a wake-up call when they get a D, because, so.
Yeah, I think it would be important for the administrative team to understand, Sarah, because I kind of heard you say 2 things. One was that maybe our communication wasn't the best around the rollout of the standards-based grading.
Correct.
And so, that would be something that you could direct us back to, go back and do a better job or re-communicate this to parents. The other one I heard is maybe that you're not necessarily behind the concept of standards-based grading, which, is certainly something that's debated often in lots of districts. So if you could just, be specific about what you want us to do as an admin team, is it re-communicate, or are we looking at changing it altogether?
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, if it was up to me, I would say go back, especially from 6th grade and up, because like I said, it's preparing the kids for high school. And I don't believe we should hold their hand and give them a 2.2 or a 2.5, because what it's doing is it's helping the kids that maybe might not, do great. This is what I see working for the 1 through 4. But the kids that strive and that really want to try, I mean, I've heard from a ton of parents, I'm not talking 2, I'm talking like 50 parents that have come to me and said, what is going on with this? I'm very frustrated. I am frustrated because my kid's frustrated because they don't feel like they can get a 4.0. And that's really what a lot of kids strive to do. They want that 4s in the class or an A. And they can't get an A because technically it's considered a B at a 3 GPA level, because when you get a 3.5 instead of a 4.0, you're getting then a 3 instead of a 4. Yeah, so it's, like I said, if it's something that we're gonna keep, which, okay, I think then we have to really outline it to the parents. And I don't know if that means an email and it's like boom, 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 like, yes, we did get 1 sheet on it. But again, I don't know if everyone understands. So like, the teachers that my daughter went and talked with, they didn't really understand how to grade it. So they're like, yeah, you can only get a 3. Okay, so I can't get a 4. So it was like asking her to ask the teacher, so she was sending emails and I was reading them and it was, nope, you can't get a 4. That's exceptional. And I'm like, okay. So like I said, the communication around it, which we can talk about next meeting, and we can kind of talk about statistics and, so.
Yeah.
I just don't want to make kids upset, not demotivate kids to want to get those grades. Okay, sorry, Bill, I'm cutting you off.
That's okay. I'm ready for Sarah is right now. I'd be a pretty firm no, absent any additional information. I would need somebody to sell me on 2 things. The idea itself, conceptually, and then how it's gonna play out in practice. And if that involves statistics and stuff, I'm perfectly fine with that. But I would need an explanation of how it works, why it's a good idea, all of it. Because, I mean, what I've seen in the grading systems, we haven't had the same experience where we're overly concerned at this age with whether or not our kid can get some perfect score I respect the fact that yours wants to.
Yeah, she wants to, so I'm like, let's do it.
And the concern that I had was, it appeared to me as though there wasn't a lot of differentiation between the achievements of one kid over another. It was difficult just to determine where my kid was at. Like they were doing fairly well, and my inclination was that they weren't actually doing as well as it looked like on paper. I would ask questions like, well, how many other kids got this score? And it sounded like a lot of kids got the similar score. Well, that renders yours meaningless. You know, we have to be able to differentiate. Now, maybe we can do that in the system, I don't know, but that's why I say, I need to be sold. I need somebody to go in and actually give me a sales pitch. This is why this is a good idea. Here's how it works in practice. Here's why it's good. And I would look at that pretty comprehensively. If it's not necessarily the best thing for my kid, but it's the best thing for the vast majority of the kids, I'm willing to consider it. I can be persuaded, but I would need to be persuaded at this point.
Right, so here's our problem in the Waterloo School District. When we publish honor roll, we have, and I'm just gonna use round numbers, if you don't want the exact numbers, I'll give them to them. But we have 70, 80, 85% of our kids on the honor roll, AB honor roll, okay? AB would indicate mastery of content for that grade level, correct? I mean, those are, C is average, A and B's are above average. Now, when we look at our forward or our standardized testing scores, we have somewhere around 25 to 30% mastery. So we have a misalignment of grades versus standardized test scores, okay? And what we know in education is that, and it's nobody's fault, it's just how it's worked over the years, that we tend to inflate kids' grades based on how well they jump through hoops, how well they follow teachers' directions in the classroom, maybe how well we like the kid, maybe how much they stay out of trouble. And so the grade becomes less of an indicator of the actual skill that the kid has knowledge of. And so when we list the standards specifically, we now have narrowed down a focus. Does this kid have that skill, or do they not have that skill? And then we give that a score so that you as parents and the child themselves know that in that particular skill, they might need work or some additional assistance with. When you say a kid has a B in science, okay, that means they're doing pretty good, but what don't they know that they didn't get an A, right? There's no indication of what the kid knows and what they don't know. And so this is really about honing down on the actual skills that we want kids to know, and it's a better reflective practice for communicating that to the kids and having them hone in on what we want them to know and what they don't know. So it definitely is different. There's no doubt about it. What you guys are saying and what we're going through in Waterloo, every district that's ever switched to standards-based grading has gone through this. So this is perfectly normal. And there's districts that have found it to be something that works for them, and there's ones that haven't. When it comes to statistics, Sarah, I think I can find just as much evidence that says standards-based grading is great as I can probably find that says it's not great, right? Yeah. So if we're going to look solely at research and statistics, we can probably find both ways.
But aren't you kind of basing that off of what you just said? You're basing it off of the test scores when, looking at it, the 1 through 4 grading, we're not given an explanation on why my kid gets a 3.1 or a 2.9. We're not understanding it. There's no explanation. So I don't know how they did, but really in this grade, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, like they're not taking one test to determine their grade. It's all of the work that goes up to it. So that test is not really weighing all of that. So these standard-based, or these testing that we have done, I mean, you could have 50% of the kids that are bad test takers. I was a horrible test taker in high school, in grade school. I was horrible. But that didn't mean I didn't know the knowledge. You know, I'm not saying that there's not truth behind that. There are some grades that are being inflated. I get that. But also we have to look at it as how it's being communicated. So if I'm truly getting, my daughter's getting a 2.2, whatever, why, and how is it being explained to her, and what areas does she need to work on? She's not being told any of that. So I think that's the other thing is, you know, so I mean, even with the testing, you don't really understand, you don't really get an understanding of what your kid did good and what they didn't, either. You just get a score and it's like.
Yeah, you'll never hear me, you know, put all my stock in test scores, because we, as you said, we know kids have test anxiety. It's one assessment on one day, and there are all sorts of variables that can play into how a student performs on that. But the fact of the matter is it is a reasonable snapshot of where a kid's at in terms of achievement. It's the reason why colleges use ACT scores for admittance. It's a reason why the state uses the forward exam to assess where the state's at in terms of education. It's the reason why there's a NAEP test given across the country. It's an indicator, right? It's not perfect, but it's an indicator. And when you have a wide disparity, that letter grades show our kids are doing great and we're great and wonderful in Waterloo, and you have test scores that say maybe something a little bit different, I don't think that's something that we can ignore.
No, and I don't think we should either. But again, I don't know if going to this grading was the best thing. Maybe it's, I don't know.
Yeah, our end goal, I don't know, but if you pull you, me, and Sarah together, our goal is probably the same. We probably want it performance-based, and yeah, if we have 70 kids, 70% of the kids that are getting A's and B's, that's a problem, that needs to change. I'm lost right now on why that needs to be a number system versus a letter system. I don't know why you couldn't, if you have a number system, why you can't just assign letters to it instead, and have a corresponding letter. The philosophy remains the same, that it should be based on what the results are and not inflated. And whatever we can do to accomplish that, I'm great. And then the community and the parents need to be able to understand what that means.
Yeah. The standard is more to help the teacher narrow in with the student to make sure that they have that skill.
Well, why don't we just apply the standard, but just make it into a letter grade? That way everybody knows it should be easy enough to do that.
That is done in some places too, yes. Yeah. So I know Christine had some things that she was willing to talk about tonight, and I hope I didn't totally throw her comments and reflections off base, because she's really kind of our administrative expert on it, but Christine would certainly give you a chance to weigh in here.
Just before you start, Christine, just for clarification's sake, we are currently K through 4 on a standards-based system?
No,
K through 8?
Yeah.
But we were K through 5 or whatever. We've been that way for how long? 4? Does anyone know that's been in place for a long time?
Yeah, for a decade or more.
Right. And so the only change that was made last year is we took it 5 to 8.
And the reason that it became pronounced for those of us that have kids in that age group, those are the ages where the kids start to get concerned.
Yep.
And frankly, so do the parents. Well, I want to know how you're doing.
Yep.
And parents
What you're
keep
doing at
speaking,
school.
and it's familiar to us to know A, B, C, D, and F. And even if we were just to use that as the system instead of the numbers, I'm not necessarily opposed to the fact that we had it, standards based. I actually agree with that.
By all means, Christine.
So, I really honor these conversations and discussions, and I want to create an environment where we can have even informal conversations where if board members have questions or parents have questions, they can come and talk through their specific questions regarding their specific students and situations. I think Mr. Henning did a fantastic job of explaining what misalignment we have seen, especially at the ISNS levels. Our goal through moving towards a standards-based system was to really be more specific with where the kids were performing, what they needed help on. We've spent a lot of time digging into the standards that you just approved as a board, and making sure that we have identified essential standards, the learning targets that the teachers, we are creating rubrics aligned to those standards so that it does lay out more specifically where the student, as far as proficiency to the standard. And I understand that there are a lot of questions and there is a lot of information out there that I can share with you. And I will start sharing some of the information that I have sent out to both teachers and to parents and to students as well. This is not a new thing. Standards-based grading has been around for a long time, but it is a new concept for the middle school. Mr. Schneider, you are absolutely right. It has been in the elementary for a very long time because it gets information more specifically about where students are, and then the teachers can intervene more quickly. But the reason that we went to standards-based grading is because when you are focusing on teaching and learning, you want to make sure that your students have a good and proficient grasp on what that standard is. So that's measured throughout the course of the school year, the semester, and it is then reflected in our state test, the forward exam, and we are doing benchmark assessments along the way. If parents are wanting specific information on where their child is as far as the STAR testing that we do, there are reports that we can pull from STAR testing that will give parents specific information on where their child is excelling for each standard and where they are not doing so well. So if that is information that the board would like us to share out to parents, we can absolutely do that. Each parent also gets a printed copy of the forward exam results, which will break out in detail how the students are doing in terms of the standards on the forward exam as well. But the theory and the philosophy behind standards-based grading, I can absolutely share out more information with you, and you just need to let me know specifically what types of information you are, considering, or what types of questions you have. And I think, Mr. Fari, I think you're right. I couldn't hear all of what you said, but there are some districts that instead of a 1, 2, 3, 4, they use an A, B, C, D system, a letter system, and we can call it whatever we want. Important part is how it communicates the student's achievement towards the standard.
Is there a reason, given your advocacy for the standards-based system and the 1, 2, 3, 4 system, is there a reason you also don't implement it in high school?
You broke up.
Is there a reason that you
Can
wouldn't?
you repeat that, please?
Yeah, is there a reason that you wouldn't apply this same philosophy to high school as well?
There are many districts that do. When you really look closely at student achievement and learning, Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, you're back.
Okay, I got a thing that said my connection was unstable. So there's a lot of districts that do standards in the high school, or they look at the standards, they tear apart the standards, they identify essential standards and create rubric school courses as well. Sometimes they go to a 1, 2, 3, 4 system. Sometimes they stay with an A, B, C, D, F system. It really depends on what the community wants.
Why, is there a way that we could do a measurement, kind of like what you were saying, Bill, like the A, B, C, D, holds, like you said, we get measured, throughout the course of the year, and then they, see how they're doing, and then they're based off of that. Is there a way that we can put that same measurement into the A, B, C, D? Like, does it have to be the 1 through 4? Or is that the only way to do it is the 1 through 4?
No, 1, 2, 3, 4, or A, B, C, D is a label. We could call it elephant, giraffe, tiger, lion. Doesn't really matter. It's the descriptor of what the proficiency is what's important and what matters. Our teachers, and I posed this question to the teachers because I said to them at the beginning of this process, this is the exact argument that I had in a previous district with understanding with parents about standards-based grading. And they were, in a previous district, they were at a 1, 2, 3, 4 labeling system. And then it was requested that we go to an A, B, C, D, F system because it made more sense to the parents as far as where their student was. So I'm not as concerned about the label of what the proficiency level is as I'm more concerned with us identifying where students are in terms of their learning and proficiency towards the standard. And my caution is to all of you, even if we change it to an A, B, C, D, F system, we still are going to have some unhappy parents because we are really grading towards the standards now. We are not grading towards completion, and even if a student, a system had gotten an A, might not get an A in because they don't have the skill or to go above and beyond and free. So I just want to caution you, even changing the label is not going to appease everybody because we're really looking at increasing the rigor to align with the standards and making sure that we are measuring what those standards say in what we teach.
I'd be on board with that. If we made that change, that would probably satisfy the concerns that I have. Absent, I would need to know what the standard is to get an A, what the standard is to get a B, what the standard is to get a C, because it's also addressing your concerns. Your daughter knows now,
And that's exactly,
this is what I have to do to get an A.
Was that explained? And also, I guess my biggest thing is were the teachers all taught this, or were they just given a document and said, you read this, hope you understand, this is how our new grading is? I mean, were they brought in and were they taught the actual grading structure? Because I know that there was a ton of them that were still confused on putting them in, and I don't know where they land. And so I guess were those questions, do we have all the teachers, all the 6th through 8th grade teachers backing up this system? Or, because really that's who we have to get the, even 5th through 8th, the teachers have to be on board. And the 7th grade teachers last year, some of them were not. So I just have to understand too, was that something that was throughout the entire 5th through 8th grade, all those teachers brought in and taught what to do and how to do it and how to implement it? Were they given a trial period to see how it worked?
So this has been a 2-year process, and the teachers have been integral in all along the way. They identified the essential standards themselves as department teams. They went through all the standards and identified the essential ones. They, together in their PLCs, created the rubrics. And throughout the last 2 years, we have had continual discussions and learning about standards-based grading. So I did not just hand it to them. It is something that they helped create, and yes, along the way, anytime you do a new system, there's going to be some learning involved and continual learning, and I would hope that there would be. So one of our biggest issues was Skyward last year, and how that did not align necessarily with what we were doing, but that is being remedied over the summer after we roll over into our new Skyward year. So some of those questions that you're talking about, Mrs. Cummings, about how Skyward averaged grades, that will be eliminated.
Okay, thank you. Is it so, to maybe get this kind of wrapped up in a fashion, what do we need to have presented at our next board meeting? Is there, first, let me retract that. Is everyone in agreement? We're gonna move this to the next board meeting for a discussion.
Yes.
Okay, we got that out of the way. Secondly, what specifically do we want to see? What do we need to help either affirm or make a different decision in regards to standard-based grading?
I would like to see two things. One, the existing numerical system, 1, 2, 3, 4, with explanations as to what it takes to get each one of those different grades. Basically, a description of exactly how the system works and what the standards are. And then I'd like to see a proposal if we do the exact same thing using a letter system. What would the standards be, and
If we didn't do
that way we have a choice between.
If we
Sure.
didn't do the
So
standard-based
I think what you truly want is remove the label and give me the metrics that you use to establish. the
No,
label.
if he's saying if we didn't use the standard grade.
No, you gotta keep in mind, I'm predisposed to go to the letter grade label. I just think it's so much easier for parents to understand, because that's what they grew up with. It's what I grew up with. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense for me not to use that. That said, whether you give, even if you give everybody in the class Bs, that's a meaningless grade. So I need to know what the B means.
What's the standard?
Yeah, what is an A, what is a B, what is a C, what is a D, what is an F? I'd like to see that for each of them right now, for both the numerical system and the letter grade system, if we decided to switch to it. Because the irony is here, we probably all agree, we actually kind of like it based on a standard, rather than it being sort of amorphous, or so discretionary that, you know, like Brian was saying, 70% of the people get A's and B's. That's absurd.
And then I would like to see how we could figure out, maybe come with ideas on how we can communicate to the parents, those standards. Because if I don't know the standard, you don't know the standard of the letters or the 1 through 4.
I'm convinced once we see it, we'll find a way to communicate it.
Yeah.
But it's telling that you have two board members here who couldn't tell you, who have kids in the grade, who couldn't tell you anything about what the grades mean.
No.
Now, that doesn't mean it's your fault for not explaining this. I didn't exactly come to you and ask you either, so that's on me. But at this point, we can remedy it, so let's do it.
Yep.
Is there anything else needed? Mr. Craig, Mr. Setz?
No, but I'm wondering, Christine, why in the world do you have a Minnesota rowing poster there? I have looked at that for months. Can you fill me in, please?
My daughter was on the Minnesota rowing team.
Nice.
So my daughter's in that poster, but you can't really see her. It's tiny.
Oh, you can't be old enough to have a daughter in college.
Oh, she's 2 years out already.
Okay, do you feel as though you have clear direction on what the board is recommending to see?
Well, I think I have clear direction, and Christine can speak for herself, but that you'd like to see the standards and the grades defined so that you can review that.
Yep.
But I also was taking notes, and I heard communication, and I heard teachers don't like it, and I heard a couple other things. So do you want us to do anything to address those pieces, or are those further down the road?
For me, that's premature.
Yep, I agree.
We need to see whether or not we like it first.
Can I make one more clarification
Please.
before we move on? So I believe Jim had some question in the handbook as in terms of grading systems. And I just wanted to clarify, first of all, I think you have an old handbook, which is why the board was not updated in there. I did have a new version of the handbook, but it must not have made it into the board packet. But the language in the board policy on grading systems says that the issuance of grades on a regular basis serves to, number one, promote a process of continuous evaluation of student performance. Number two, inform the student and his or her parent or guardian of the student's progress in relationship to established learner expectations based on state standards. And number three, provide a basis for bringing about change in student performance if such change is deemed necessary. And those are the things, those are the foundational principles for standards-based grading. So we are trying to communicate with our rubrics how the students are performing in terms of the standards, and that also informs the teachers on what they need to do in order to help that student meet proficiency. So the language that I just read to you is the exact language that is in our handbook, and I just hope that clarifies the questions that Jim had.
Good, Jim? Okay. So if we bring this if we receive this information, I feel confident we'll be able to reach a decision to either affirm what we've already approved or possibly modify or change. Fair assessment?
Yes.
Okay. So we will not take action. We will move this to the next board meeting. Brings us to action item J, the weighted grading system.
And you said that one was gonna go to the next board meeting?
It is, the question has been proposed in our informer packet. We want the administration to present a plan for weighted grading at the August board meeting. Again, we've already identified we don't have a full board this evening, but do we have any discussions to facilitate what exactly we would want to have presented to make a decision in regards to weighted grading? Very similar discussion about grading again.
So,
Board commentary.
I really don't know much about it. But then I heard Ms. Bosniak speak perhaps not so favorably about weighted grading. So, I need more information.
We had a big, long discussion about this last time when you weren't
Oh, yeah, I was at 4-H
here. I
camp.
would be happy to summarize the entire conversation for you in less than 20 words.
I was failing my swimming test at 4-H camp, so.
I mean, Matt, maybe just like we're looking at, maybe explaining so Charlie understands, and maybe having like the pros and cons of having a weighted, and I do know that some of the admin is not favorable of the weighted grading, but maybe also hearing some that are, would be helpful too, to be able to assess the situation to see what's best. And I know last meeting we discussed maybe looking at making it a little bit different, you know, maybe putting on some type of weight for the extra, you know, the different classes, you know, and not making it only in the AP classes, and how would that look, and how would that work? Maybe coming up with a different solution instead of yes or no.
Okay?
And I'm not sure how that would look, but
Right.
I'm
That's,
open to
we're
figure-
at such a broad-based point
Yes.
of, if we wanted to make a decision to go to a weighted system, we have to have a weighted system. So logically, to me, I would ask the administration to present their feelings on it, which I believe they have previously, but when we have a full board, so we can have that discussion and get all the players at the party, if you will, to, again, pros and cons. There's an equity piece that has to be solved. But then if you decide that, yes, you want one, there are so many avenues that can be gone down. So trying to hone that in it's tough, to say the least. So, I mean, the admin presented last time, and I'm sorry Charlie went there, should have filled you in a little better. But we talked basically on, it pertains to scholarships in the district and how scholarships are awarded on merit. So there's definitely lots of parts and pieces. And, I mean, to make a decision, it's a tough task to even tell the administration what we need them to bring to the meeting.
I can give you a little bit of the pros and cons of this. So I've been vacillating back and forth on this issue. When it was first brought up, I was entirely in favor of a weighted grading system. Well, I shouldn't say that. I was against it, and I was for it, and I was sort of against it again. The proponents of it, of going to a weighted system, would say, well, when you go and you compete against other students from other high schools to get into a university, and they come in with a 4.3 GPA, and you didn't even have the opportunity to have a 4.3, you're at a significant disadvantage. And there was some discussion around the issue of, well, when you go into a college, they account for that. So they adjust everybody's scores based on what your maximum score would be. Now, I haven't dug into that issue myself. I assume that must be the case somehow, or how would colleges differentiate between, high schools that graded on a 5-point scale, for instance, instead of a 4-point scale. The administration, I think, has a really fair argument that we live in a rural community to a certain extent. We have a lot of kids that aren't going to college and take all kinds of different classes, ag classes, shop classes, and I think it's a very fair argument that those kids aren't going to be going into those college prep classes anyways, which is the ones that you are planning to weight. So it disadvantages those kids against the other ones, even though they're just as hard as working and as deserving of getting the accolades that the other kids don't. So it's a disadvantage to them. I think that's a pretty powerful argument. Yeah, it carried a lot of weight with me. I guess on balance right now, I would stay to a non-weighted system unless we could come up with something that didn't harm the other kids. In other words, it only had a couple of really, really seriously difficult classes that we did give some weight to, just to give some benefit to the kids that went above and beyond. I would consider something like that, but that's where I'm at with it.
And where was, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. What I was going to add, where it's somewhat rooted, that some of the AP courses may be deemed as more work than some of the electives. But again, a strong argument as far as being a con or against this is, will deter students from wanting to take those courses then, and now we're going to have less to offer at the district as far as a variety of courses. Because, you have your arts and music classes, etc. So it all weighs into the overall grand scheme of that weighted system.
All right. I think that some of the AP classes that kids take, they don't all take the AP test. You know what I mean? So, if you don't take the test, you don't get the credit. I know there's a cost to it, but if you want to take that AP course, why would you not take the test? And I'm not for grade weighting. I don't think it's a good plan for our school. And unless you put a staple on there, if you're going to take the AP course, if you don't take the test, well, then the grade's not going to be used. I agree. But I just don't understand why you would take an AP course and not take the test. Because that's advanced placement, correct?
take it, without taking it. Right. It's much more economical to take it to high school than it is to college.
Still.
Okay. I know much more than I did before.
Can I, real quick, just chip in on one piece of your conversation, and maybe Mr. Henning can talk about the scholarship piece as well? I don't know, Mr. Henning, if you want to bring that up now or the August meeting?
Yeah, I can talk about it, and I think, you know, the way the administrative team was looking at this, because I don't like it when we're trying to fix something that isn't broke, or at least I'm not sure what the problem we're trying to fix is. And maybe if I understood what the problem was a little better, the administrative team could do a better job trying to fix it for you. Because, you know, the argument of, you know, scholarships being determined on GPA, okay, you might have something a little bit there. But the one scholarship that we're aware of that does that to a little bit, we've had conversations with that group, and they understand the situation that we're in, and they're amenable to changing their criteria for the scholarship. So, so if we change, you know, how that scholarship's given, then do we still need to look at weighted grading? I'm not sure. And then when it comes to getting into college, it sounds like, you know, there's some individuals that had some experiences, you know, with being at a disadvantage for those weightings, but, you know, the more we research it and the more we keep being told that, you know, colleges account for systems that are different because they get applicants from all over the nation. I think there's more to look into when that argument comes. So, you know, if you sort of remove those two things from the equation, then I'm not sure what's left to be the justification for changing what we're doing. And I said this last time, and I'll say it again. There probably are some nuances that you may address by going to a weighted grading system, but I'm fearful that you'll create even worse nuances with changing the system to fix some of those other things. And, you know, again, you'll find schools that are doing it both ways. It's more of a philosophical piece. But when it comes to a small school, we have demographics and we have circumstances here that we feel a non-weighted system lends itself more favorably to. So if we were in Madison, you know, I probably would feel differently. A weighted system probably would work there because all the kids don't know each other's class rank and GPA and know every class that the kids are taking every semester and talk about, you know, their grade point average. That's different here. All of our kids know that stuff because they share with each other. So there is some of it that's applicable based on the school that you're in too. So Sean, you had some things.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well, Mr. Henning. I've reached out to colleges as well since our last meeting just to get more background on it, and I've had conversations from like a Madison college to a Big Ten to a Ivy League school, and all the responses have been that they do not penalize students or institutions based off of just GPA because there are so many different ways schools grade. They look at leadership, they look at volunteer, they, looking at the email now, extracurricular activity, community engagement, letter of recommendation, standardized test scores. GPA is not the only aspect. So if someone does come in with a 4.6, but not very strong community engagement, or ACT score, they would probably take someone from Waterloo with a 3.94, a 34 ACT, and a lot of community engagement. So they weigh a lot of different things. They don't penalize schools for having weighted or not having weighted grades.
Just to clarify, Sean, maybe, I can't recall, I know we got it last meeting, I think, but percentage of students from this year's class that are going on to a 4-year institution or 2-year institution, what's the percentage?
Yeah, so we surveyed our students, and this was done in early May, so things changed. But we were at, out of about 60 graduating students, 20 of them were four-year school, four-year college, 20 were tech school, two-year, and then 20 were undecided, workforce, or, getting into some trades of some sort. So it was like a third, a third, a third. And the one thing is, you look at a weighted system in a smaller school, which we talked about, and something just to think about when I brought up equity last meeting, you're then looking at just a third of our students most likely being in weighted classes. So that means 66% of our students possibly wouldn't have an opportunity to be in a top 15 because they are taking a different pathway. And who's to say a welding 2 class isn't a challenging class for a student maybe taking an AP chemistry class, or, you can have your arguments all over the place. I think Ms. Bosnick kind of talked about that a little bit from her standpoint.
Any other questions, board members, or information that we would need brought to the next meeting? As I'm making an assumption that we want to move this to the next meeting for a full board.
Yes.
Okay. Any information we want, or are we just gonna rehash this conversation again? And just make a decision?
You don't want to rehash it?
No, I'm saying I don't think there's anything new to bring to the table. We have to hash it out. and
No,
make a
but I
decision.
do think it would be a good thing, especially like the other board member, she's not here. It would be good for Sean to explain that to her.
Sure.
What he got to talk with the colleges. I think that would be important, because she did have a different experience. So I think that would be fantastic. That's good information. And then we can vote.
Okay. I'm sure you'll be available to share the
Is
next
that
meeting.
okay? Sorry, I just totally acted like you would. Okay.
We're good, all right. So, hearing that, we will not take action on action item J. And that concludes our new business. Go ahead.
You wait till August, you wanna implement this, how much time would they give you, Mr. Henning?
Not a lot. None.
I know I called and asked you about that question, and I thought we could make a decision tonight, but I don't know, a couple board members are gone, but we do have a quorum.
Well, we could take that into account next time. And if we decide that we could plan on implementing it a year later.
We could not discuss this next week at our special meeting after, like, even if it's like these two action items, discuss next Wednesday.
Well, it's a board training meeting, I don't know how long that's gonna go, right?
I know.
I'll be here all night.
I know, my wife's been training me for 40 years. And that's an old one, but it's appropriate.
Well,
Jim, the truth of the matter is, and I'll just speak plainly, even though I'm sure it'll offend some people, but, I think on both of these issues, the board is a little bit out of their lane on both of them. I think you have experts that you hired to make these decisions for you, and I don't understand, why those people aren't be given the benefit of the doubt. But having said that, I think there is tremendous value in this discussion, and I'm very happy that we're having these kinds of discussions at board meetings, because this is what really matters for kids. So if it takes us a little extra time to bring everybody along and get everybody to a place where they're comfortable in the community and on this board, then we're gonna be stronger in the end as a result of that. And so, yes, it will put us under the gun a little bit to wait till August to make some of these decisions final, but I think the admin team understands the value of all of us working together to make this right, and we want to do that. So let's continue the discussion next month, and we'll get it done before the start of school, whatever path that is.
Yep. So that does conclude our new business.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Seth, seconded by Ms. Cummings to adjourn. Let the time show it's 8:10. All those in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 voice vote. Thank you, everyone. You're welcome. Remember, next week, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Same place.